pen hovered over the page, trembling slightly in her hand. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, painting the walls with hues of amber and gold. She sat at the desk in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes, half-packed with memories she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. Tomorrow was the wedding, and tonight was supposed to be about final preparations, confirming the seating chart, reviewing the vows one last time, maybe sneaking a glass of wine to calm her nerves. But instead, here she was, staring at a blank sheet of paper, trying to write something that felt impossible. "Why is this so hard?" she whispered to herself, tapping the pen against the edge of the desk. It wasn't as if she didn't love him. She did, deeply. Michael had been her rock for the past 5 years, steady and unwavering when life threatened to pull her under. He made her laugh on days when laughter felt like a distant memory, held her close when the world seemed too loud, too overwhelming. They'd built a life together, piece by piece, brick by brick. And yet, sitting here now, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She glanced down at the ring on her finger, its diamond catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows onto the wall. It was beautiful, perfect even, just like everything else about their relationship. Too perfect, perhaps. The thought startled her, unbidden and sharp. She pushed it aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Writing her vows shouldn't feel like climbing a mountain, should it? It was supposed to be easy, natural, a chance to pour her heart onto paper and remind herself why they were doing this in the first place. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, fragments of memory surfaced, unbidden and disjointed. Their first date at that little Italian restaurant where the waiter spilled red wine on her dress. The way he'd laughed, not cruelly, but warmly, telling her it only added character. The countless mornings spent sipping coffee side by side, neither speaking, but both content in the silence. And then there were the harder moments, the fights over finances, the arguments about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, the quiet stretches where they drifted apart before finding their way back to each other again. It wasn't that they didn't work through things, they always did. But lately, she'd begun to wonder if working through things was enough. Wasn't love supposed to be more than just surviving the storms? Shouldn't it also mean thriving in the calm? A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Hey," came her sister's voice, soft and hesitant. "Can I come in?" "Yeah," she replied, setting the pen down and turning toward the doorway. Her sister, Rachel, stepped inside, balancing 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She set them on the desk before perching on the edge of the bed, studying her carefully. "You okay?" Rachel asked, tilting her head slightly. "You look distracted." "I'm fine," she said quickly, though the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "Just writing my vows." Rachel raised an eyebrow, glancing at the empty page. "Doesn't look like you've gotten very far." "I know," she admitted with a sigh, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be able to do this. I want to do this. But every time I try to put pen to paper, it feels forced." Her sister frowned, concern etched into the lines around her eyes. "Forced how?" She hesitated, unsure how much to say. Like I'm reciting lines from a script instead of saying what I really feel. Like I'm convincing myself more than anyone else." Rachel was silent for a moment, processing this. Then she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Do you still want to marry him?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut, sudden and jarring. "Of course I do," she said automatically, though the conviction in her voice wavered. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because you're sitting here doubting yourself the night before your wedding," Rachel pointed out gently. "And because I've seen the way you've been acting lately, not just today, but for weeks. You've been distant, distracted, like part of you isn't fully here." "That's not true," she protested, though the words felt hollow. "I'm just stressed. Weddings are stressful." "Sure," Rachel agreed, holding up her hands in surrender. "But stress doesn't usually make people question whether they're making the right decision." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, the truth weighing heavily on her chest. Rachel wasn't wrong. Over the past few months, she'd caught herself wondering, just fleetingly, just briefly, if she was rushing it into something she wasn't ready for. Every time the thought arose, she shoved it away, telling herself it was normal to have cold feet. Everyone got nervous before their wedding day, didn't they? Yet deep down, she knew this wasn't just nerves. This was something deeper, something she hadn't dared to confront until now. "I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if we're settling for comfort instead of passion. Does that make sense?" Rachel nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Comfort's important. Stability, security. Those things matter. But they're not enough on their own. Love needs fire, too. It needs excitement, unpredictability. Do you feel that with Michael? She thought about it, really thought about it. There was no denying that Michael brought stability to her life, a sense of grounding she'd never experienced before. He was kind, dependable, endlessly supportive. But passion? Fire. Those weren't words she associated with him, at least not anymore. In the beginning, yes, there had been sparks, late-night conversations that stretched into dawn, spontaneous road trips, laughter so infectious it left them breathless. But somewhere along the way, those moments had faded, replaced by routine and responsibility. "I used to," she said quietly, "but lately, I don't know. It feels like we're playing roles rather than living our lives. Like we're checking boxes instead of chasing dreams." Rachel reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "That doesn't mean it's over. Relationships evolve. What matters is whether you're willing to fight for what you have, and whether he's willing to meet you halfway." The words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. She knew Rachel was right. Love required effort, compromise, sacrifice. But it also required honesty. And right now, she wasn't being honest with herself, or with Michael. How could she stand at the altar tomorrow, and promise forever, when she wasn't even sure what she wanted? "I need to talk to him," she said suddenly, standing up and pacing the room. "Tonight, before the wedding." Rachel looked surprised, but nodded. "Good. Whatever happens, you'll be glad you did." The drive to Michael's apartment felt longer than usual, each mile stretching out endlessly beneath her tires. Her mind raced with possibilities, scenarios, outcomes. What if he didn't understand? What if he thought she was having second thoughts because of nerves, not because of legitimate concerns? And what if, worst of all, he dismissed her fears entirely, brushing them off as trivial or irrational? When she arrived, she found him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she entered, smiling warmly. "Hey, you're early. Everything okay?" She hesitated, clutching her purse tightly. "We need to talk." His smile faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of concern. "Okay, what's going on?" Taking a deep breath, she sank onto the couch beside him, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about us, about the wedding, about everything. And I realized something I haven't been honest about, not with you, and not with myself." Michael frowned, leaning closer. "What is it?" "It's not that I don't love you," she began, her voice trembling. "I do. So much. But I think I've been ignoring some things. Things that scare me. Things that make me wonder if we're rushing him into this without really knowing what we want." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Are you saying you don't want to get married?" "No," she said quickly. "At least I don't think so. But I need to figure that out, for both our sakes, because standing at the altar tomorrow and promising forever is not fair to either of us if I'm not completely sure." Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. She braced herself for anger, frustration, disbelief. Instead, Michael sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I had a feeling something was bothering you," he admitted softly. "You've seemed distant lately. I just didn't know how to bring it up." Relief washed over her, mingled with guilt. "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." "It's okay," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But what do you want to do? Postpone the wedding? Call it off entirely?" "I don't know," she admitted, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "All I know is that I can't go through with it tomorrow unless I'm absolutely certain. Not just for me, but for you too. You deserve someone who's all in, not someone who's questioning everything." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Then we'll figure it out. Together. Whatever happens, we'll face it." The next morning, she woke up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The weight of uncertainty still lingered, but it was tempered by clarity. She called her parents, explained the situation, and postponed the wedding indefinitely. To her surprise, they understood, even supported her decision. Friends sent messages of encouragement, reminding her that love was worth fighting for, even if it meant taking a step back. As for Michael, they spent the following weeks talking openly, honestly, vulnerably, about their fears, their hopes, their dreams. Slowly but surely, the distance between them began to shrink, replaced by a renewed sense of connection. By the time they stood at the altar 6 months later, the vows they spoke weren't just promises. They were declarations, forged in the fires of doubt and strengthened by the courage to confront it. And as she slipped the ring onto his finger, she knew one thing for certain. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about growth, about choosing each other again and again, even when the path ahead was uncertain.